that the United States has lost 90,000 factories, plants, not refineries, but like smelters. And this is an opportunity, perhaps, to reshore some of those factory jobs. Next, we're going to talk to Mark Shaw. Mark is an author and attorney based in Los Angeles. He's also an expert in the John F. Kennedy assassination, which he has researched extensively, but through the lens of his actual research or interest into the famous journalist Dorothy Kilgallen. Kilgallen was one of the most popular reporter personalities in the 50s and 60s. She had a huge morning drive show on WR in New York. She was a weekly panelist on the CBS primetime game show, What's My Line? And she had a column that she wrote for the New York Post that was syndicated in more than 200 newspapers around the country. She, immediately after the Kennedy assassination, went to Dealey Plaza, went to Dallas, interviewed people in that first week after Kennedy was shot. She got the sort of bedrock interviews. She also became an acquaintance of Jack Ruby, and she was intrigued by the Jack Ruby story, which didn't ring true to her. And as she dug into the Jack Ruby story, she started to see that the official narrative around the Kennedy assassination was just not ringing true. So we're going to talk to Mark Shaw about that. And then finally, we're going to talk to a good friend of mine, Tommy Marquez, who is a Republican strategist, who is a longtime senior Capitol Hill staffer. And we're going to talk about the ATF and the changes at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, now that is under the control of Kash Patel. And so it'll be a huge show for you. But first, let's talk to my good friend, Jim Path. There's so much to talk about going on in Washington, D.C. And of course, you're completely locked into this. Because of the jobs you've held, you understand the inner workings of this machine, right? And so first, let's talk about Chief Justice John Roberts and the trouble he's gotten himself into. This is the second time he has stepped forward out of his sort of, I'm just calling balls and strikes. We're not supposed to be involved. And all of a sudden he's involved. In the first term, he chastised President Trump. Now in the second term, he's gone again. What's your call on Roberts criticizing Trump because he supports the impeachment of rogue judges? Go ahead, please, sir.
Well, I'll tell you what really is frustrating about this entire process of what's going on is, for example, in one of these major cases, you have a district judge who has one portion of Northern California in the San Francisco area who receives a case that plaintiffs put out that is far too broad. It has far too many people that they're actually, many of whom, not directly counsel for because the other people aren't paying for it. And he makes a sweeping decision over an entire process within the executive branch. Listen, courts are supposed to judge on discrete cases at law, meaning the counsel represents specific named people, and the judgment is about what, at least in the pre-appellate level, the judgment is about what's specific to that case. John Roberts had an opportunity to stop that process. There are many legal scholars that are very, very frustrated with what is happening. And I mentioned one case. There are 100 or more cases right now where you've got Democrats, Mark Elias, George Soros's Open Society Foundation. They're putting out lawsuits just to stop Donald Trump from being president. That is their entire goal. But Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution says the executive power is given to a president of the United States, the sitting president. And they're using the judicial system to shut it down. John Roberts knows that this is bad. He had an opportunity to fix a bad problem. This is a guy who has claimed for years he wants the authority and the trust in the court to be very strong, but he keeps undermining that trust and authority at every turn. This is a really, really bad situation he's put himself in. Twice, by the way, to a guy, John Roberts says he's against the administrative state. Twice, he supported Obamacare on two different cases that caught up two different aspects of Obamacare, which is clearly unconstitutional. And he refused. He was the deciding vote that kept it in play. This guy is a grave disappointment
I'll
for
tell
many
you.
years.
Here's a guy, John Roberts, right? He says, "Oh, I just call balls and strikes," and he also, when the conservative majority looks like it's going to succeed, he will, because of his prerogatives as the Chief Justice, he will weigh in to try to make the conservative judgment as narrow as possible so it virtually affects nothing, right?
Yeah.
However, when he does nothing, when you have a federal judge in some single district who's basically making a judgment for like the entire free world. And basically this judge is ordering military planes to turn around, right? Military planes under the command of the President of the United States. Turn around. I'm a judge in the District of Columbia. How dare you? There was a priest I follow, Father Esposito. I follow him on X. He said Trump should have ran for district judge if he really wanted to run the government, because that's how it's done. That's how it's done. So what happens before we move on to another friend of yours, Chuck Schumer? What happens? Does Robert get disciplined? Does Roberts get ignored? How does this play out quick? Because I want to go to Schumer.
Yeah, the only way to discipline him per se is impeachment proceedings. I don't know. I wouldn't support that. What does need to happen is public shaming of him from politicians. Listen, FDR shamed the court, and he got the court to do what he wanted by threatening them. And he did take on a political power. So Donald Trump needs to take that on. He's being wise right now. He's not saying we need to ignore courts and do nothing. But he does need to put the political pressure on these guys, and I think that's an appropriate way to handle this.
Yeah, 1,000%. Okay, the senator from New York, the senior senator from New York, Chuck Schumer, has always played a very clever game. He's raised money for Republican senators on the side. He's had his team, his staff, write bills that he convinced Republican senators to sponsor and be the front man for over and over again. There are these bills where you look and you say, why would Pat Toomey be sponsoring an anti-gun bill? It's because it was written by Schumer, and Schumer put him up to it. And he does this over and over again. And everyone gives McConnell credit. Too few people are giving Schumer credit for being a master of the dark arts of Capitol Hill, especially on that Senate wing. However, he really jacked things up. He did not play it well. What happens with Chuck Schumer?
Well, first of all, the reason he did what he did is he actually read the political winds properly. Democrats were going to get slaughtered if there was a government shutdown. He knew that and was trying to avoid it. Do not read into Chuck Schumer's vote for the CR that he was coming to some reasonable conclusion that it would be a good thing to do. It had nothing to do with it. It was entirely political. But what's going to happen to him now that he has taken that stand? He is in a very precarious situation, not the potential of AOC running against him in a Democrat primary. By the way, I don't think she can win statewide.
Well, that's not till 28.
That's not till 28. What will be a challenge is his leadership position. Will Democrats bolt from him in the Senate? I don't see that happening yet. There may be a pressure point that comes, but I don't see it yet. Remember, it's the House that's mad at him and going after him right now.
Remember that the majority-minority leader, that is not a constitutional position. That's a party position. So he can be overthrown. All he needs is like whatever simple majority of the senators on the Democratic side. They could toss him out at lunch. Last thing is J.D. Vance has been named the treasurer of the Republican National Committee. Does that set him up for 28 and what I've called the 12-year ticket, Trump, Vance, Vance? Your call, sir.
If J.D. Vance runs RNC the way it ought to be run, which I'll give a little bit of credit to Mark Watley during last year's election, although not enough because he's still kind of an establishment guy.
Having said that, go ahead.
Yeah. So
Jimmy.
JD Vance doing this, if he'll run it the right way and make it stop being a place for consultants to make a lot of money and make it be a place to find consultants that will help win elections, he will be president for 8 years, and we will all be happy about it. I'm not endorsing him now. What I'm saying is I think he's setting himself up for that. And it would be positive for conservatives and for MAGA.
Jimmy, I never love you as much as when you agree with me. That's a beautiful thing.
Hey, why you interview your friends?
Exactly. It's so much easier this way. All right. We'll see you next week. Check out the Conservative Caucus. And thanks, Jimmy. We'll see you next week. I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, my friend.
All right. After the break, we're going to talk to another friend of mine, Angie Wong, who's a Republican strategist. And we're going to be talking about the politics and the revenue and the policy and everything to do with tariffs, which is a word that nobody was talking about 2 years ago. And now that's all people can talk about. We'll have tariffs and Angie Wong after the break.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Introducing the Sentry Wellness System, the ultimate under-sink water treatment solution designed with you in mind. Say goodbye to harmful toxins and hello to water enriched with essential nutrients like calcium and magnesium. Enjoy the benefits of increased pH for on-demand alkalinity, all from a zero-waste system that fits seamlessly into your home. Installation is a breeze, taking just 15 minutes, so you can have clean, healthy, great-tasting water straight from your tap. Perfect for apartments, homes, rentals, and even RVs. Elevate your hydration and well-being with the Sentry Wellness System because you deserve the best in every drop.
Sentry H2O. Tap into wellness.
Hey, welcome back. Right now, we're going to talk to Angie Wong, who is a brilliant Republican conservative strategist and political consultant and a great friend. Angie, welcome to Washington Desk.
Hey, Neil, thanks for having me.
So, Angie, I was saying before when I was doing my intro that 2 or 3 years ago, nobody was really talking about tariffs. Even in the first term, tariffs were there, but they weren't just everywhere. Like everywhere you turn a corner down a dark alley, there's a tariff waiting for you. So tariffs, everyone's talking about tariffs. To you, tariffs, good idea, bad idea? What do you think Trump's trying to do? Maybe focus on the revenue side first.
Yeah, no, tariffs are sexy again. I mean, it is the talk of the town in Washington and elsewhere because Trump is using tariffs as a way of negotiating and renegotiating all these bad contracts that the US once had with all of our friendly allies and our global players. Look, it's time that we stop talking about free trade and we start talking about fair trade. And I think that's what's happening here. Trump's a business guy. He's going to renegotiate every single contract that we have. Right now, the Canadians are charging us, Americans, 270% on eggs and dairy products. Do you think that's fair? Absolutely not. So now we have to start talking about fair trade.
Hold on, look, you're mentioning Canada, which just drives me nuts because these guys, they're like, oh, hey, shoot the pook and the ghoul, eh? We're your friends, eh? And then they're just jamming us. They're jamming us on lumber and jamming us on dairy. Georgia's Bank, they have the best, they negotiated the best slice of Georgia's Bank that fisheries off the New England coast that I patrolled in the Coast Guard as a boy. Before the renegotiation of NAFTA, I don't know what it is now, but before Trump renegotiated NAFTA, so now we're in NAFTA, the Minnesota sold more dairy products to Red China than to Canada. And so Michigan, New York, Maine, all of these sort of bordering states, they go, oh yeah, we do so much business with these American states. Yeah, but no dairy. It's always going the other way. And it's like all the factories are in Ontario. They're not in Michigan. They're not in Wisconsin. They're not in Minnesota anymore. I think that the White House has said that they could get maybe $1 trillion in new revenues from tariffs. But even if it was 500 or 700 million, do you think that will make a dent? Do you think that's good? I mean, where do you think they're going on that?
Yeah, look, US tariffs actually just strengthens the US dollar, right? So it actually makes imported goods more expensive. It helps our dollar. It absorbs the inflation crisis that we're heading into. And right now, the US dollar is pretty weak around the world. We have other currencies competing with us, like BRICS, for example, and even oil barrels. Other countries are using other currencies to buy oil when it used to be the US dollar that was in favor. So we need to gain all that stuff back. As you mentioned, a lot of our manufacturing, a lot of our farm goods, our dairy goods, our meats, all the good stuff is getting shipped overseas because you have buyers who don't mind paying the tariffs and paying a lot more than Americans. So we end up having pretty much the byproducts, right? Our farmers are dealing with a lot of foreign players because they're willing to pay a lot more. So we need all the good stuff back to us. We need to strengthen our dollars. We need to fix our inflation problems, and all of this can be done with tariff negotiations, and that's what Trump is doing.
Yeah, 1,000%. You know, I love reading the New York Times just because that's how I was raised, right? I just love folding it. I buy the actual paper, right? But you read these articles. So one part of the paper on the business section on the front page is always telling me tariffs bad, scary, terrible, right? And then you read another part of the paper. China's building this huge electric car factory in Spain because the European Union has put tariffs on electric cars. And it's like, oh, so great idea for Spain. Great idea. Tariffs are great for the European Union, but for us, bad, scary. I think that it's time we start playing by the same rules that everybody else is playing with. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. And, the previous administrations, they didn't touch tariffs. They didn't touch any of these contracts that we had going for years and years and years. We're finally getting to it. We're going to hopefully have some better negotiations. And you know what's happened since Trump has been in office for 60 days now? Well, all these companies are bringing back their manufacturing to the US. We're going to start producing stuff in the US again, which, if I were a governor of a state right now, I'm competing for those, companies to come to my state. I'm going to throw tax incentives left and right so that chip manufacturing can come into, I don't know, Tennessee or whatever it may be. That's the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. That's why it's so good for America right now. And more importantly, you're going to be able to have skilled workers back in the USA. And I think this solves so many of the US problems that we've inherited from the previous administration. It solves short-term and long-term goals. I think this is what Trump wants as his legacy, right? This is completely in line with his America First policies. He's doing the dirty work to get it done, which means he's doing the art of the deal, right? He's throwing out there to the Canadians and the Mexicans and everybody else and saying, hey, we're just going to tariff you 200%. And then see how the players feel, because that's what he always does. He throws out the extreme just to see how everyone reacts. And then he wheels and deals when it comes time. And that's what we're seeing right now. So don't react to these crazy tariff negotiations because you don't know where they will end up.
Yeah, and I think the politics has definitely changed on Capitol Hill because people are listening. There's a lot of people who are working at Walmart, right? But their dads and uncles all had a job at a Ford plant. And so they don't want to hear about free trade. And certainly a free trade agreement isn't 1,000 pages long, right? A free trade agreement is like one paragraph. It's like one sentence. There will be free trade. So if any kind of agreement that's 1,000 pages long, that is a shopping list. That's like ornaments on the Christmas tree for all the lobbyists. In the time we have left, how is it going to play on Capitol Hill? The president has tremendous latitude because of the laws that are already on the books. But do you think Capitol Hill is warming up the tariffs, even though they're very, very scary?
Well, I don't know why they should be scared of them, because ultimately it's going to bring down taxes for all Americans. And I think that is the biggest driver and the biggest message that we should push out there. Look, nobody wants to talk about tariffs because this is not something that's really all that important to the average Americans. What is important? Oh, well, let's see. Let's try to get rid of taxes for those making under $150,000 a year. That's what Trump has proposed. And I don't doubt that by the end of 4 years of him being president, he's going to try to eradicate a lot of taxes, including property taxes and maybe income taxes altogether, if we can get the tariff game right. Now, nobody wants to see how the sausage is made, but this is what we're talking about. If we can get better contracts with the global players, we can bring manufacturing back into the USA, and we have the skilled workers here who make money and pump money into the economy. Maybe taxes could be a thing of the past, but that's just a dream at the moment.
Okay, before I ask you the last question, where can people find you on the socials?
Oh boy, I'm all over the place, but you can best find me on X, Twitter, because we love Elon Musk, at Angie Wong, just at Angie Wong. I was very lucky to be one of the first subscribers to Twitter back in the day. So do write to me. Love to hear from you.
Okay, last question is 1 year from now, when President Trump is giving his State of the Union address, will the tariffs he's talking about that are going into effect now and then on April 2nd, the reciprocity tariffs, will they be in place, or will he have backed down? Do you think they'll fall because maybe countries are saying, oh, wait, you're serious? We're going to drop our tariffs. So 1 year from now, what will be the status of tariffs? Your call, please.
I think that a lot of companies are willing to wheel and deal with us, and they're going to bring a lot of the manufacturing back here. So he's going to champion those who took the bite and brought manufacturing, auto, chips, everything back to the USA. The ones who are not wheeling and dealing with him, well, they're just going to fall off to the side. They're going to get benched, those countries. That's what Trump does. Now, the US Canada energy trade, that's going to be, those tariffs actually are a little bit scary because Canada does supply a lot of our energy, especially to the northern states like Michigan, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. We can't play around with that. I hope that Trump handles that with a little bit more kid gloves, because right now we don't have the infrastructure to heat up all those houses up north, and it's still winter. So 1 year from now, Neil, I think we're going to have some really good deals to boast, and those who don't wheel and deal with us today, well, they're going to lose out on generations of American buyers.
All right, Angie, thank you for joining us at Washington Desk. You'll please come back, please?
All the time, Neil. It's so great seeing you back on air. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, take care. All right, after the break, we're going to talk to Mark Shaw, who is a lawyer and author who wrote the book, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, and did some significant research into the Kennedy assassination, but all through the lens of his research into the late journalist Dorothy Kilgallen. We'll have Mark Shaw after the break.
What if there was a product that could help you control cravings, burn more fat, boost your metabolism, promote healthy blood glucose levels, lower inflammation, optimize insulin sensitivity, support healthy blood lipid levels, and support healthy blood pressure? Introducing Bellatrim.
My wife has been taking Bellatrim now, and she said, Brandon, we have really got to promote this because people don't understand this isn't just about a comprehensive weight management. It will help regulate your blood glucose levels. It will lower bad cholesterol. Overall, it's good for your cardiac health. And she said there's a lot of science behind this.
G'day, I'm Dr. Mark Muller for Bella Grace, and I'd like to have a chat with you about Bellatrim, our comprehensive weight management product. Now, most people early on will register a reduction in cravings associated with Bellatrim. How does it do that? Well, it does it by changing the levels of hormones that are associated with either hunger or satiety. It lowers the levels of ghrelin, a hunger hormone, and it raises the levels of GLP-1, the satiety hormone. There is an absolutely fascinating action on a metabolic switch called AMP kinase, AMPK. AMPK is associated with the preferential burning of fat as a metabolic fuel. And as a result, you have a reduction in visceral fat and reduction in waist circumference. It also helps regulate blood glucose. Blood glucose is a huge factor in weight management. It also improves your microbiome. We do that by several ways. One, there's an ingredient in there that stimulates greater diversity. And the other one is prebiotics, FOS and GOS, that help feed the good bacteria, gentrify your microbiome. So, Bellatrim, comprehensive. Enjoy it.
To learn more about Bellatrim and other Bella Grace products, visit melissahouseBG.com.
Welcome back. My next guest is a phenomenal author, researcher, and attorney based in Los Angeles. And he's also made himself an expert on the Kennedy assassination through the filter, or through the lens, or prism, maybe is better, of his research into the life and work of Dorothy Kilgallen. Mark Shaw, welcome to Washington Desk. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and so there's a lot to unpack, but we're gonna. I promise the viewers I'm gonna stay focused this time and not go down Tobacco Road. Okay, just
yes, sir.
First glance, you followed all of these JFK dumps. What did you think of the last dump of JFK files? Were you happy, sad, disappointed, shocked? Go ahead, please, sir.
Well, there's two sides to that, I guess, because as you know, in my new book, Injustice of the First Degree, I look into both the deaths of Robert Kennedy and JFK. First thing I noticed was, and it's been in all the news reports and everything, there's very few files, records on Robert Kennedy's death. And that's disappointing. Now, I don't know exactly why that is, but as you know, in my new book, I've been able to show that there's a real motive there with regard to what happened to him that flows through Carlos Marcello and Sirhan and so on and so forth. So that disappointed me. In terms of the second thing that disappointed me, I looked at, as I did in the last batch, the first thing I looked at in there is Dorothy Kilgallen's name in there. Not once in 64, 80,000, whatever it is, pages, not once. And the second thing that I looked in there for was Carlos Marcello, the mafia gangster who had the greatest motive to have killed John F. Kennedy, and then in 1968, Robert Kennedy. Now, this said, what really hit me hard was I feel like that this new task force on looking into the twin assassinations there and Martin Luther King, they're going down the same road that the Warren Commission did. And I think they're making the same mistakes. The reason is that right now what they're focusing on is, the members of the task force went to Dallas. They went to Dealey Plaza. They went to that terrible place called the Sixth Floor Museum, which is a shrine to Oswald. They completely focused in on Oswald. They tried to interview some people who were with the Warren Commission and all that before. Well, we all know that Warren Commission report, as Dorothy Kilgallen, and we can talk about who she was, 18-month investigation of her friend JFK's death. And the first book I wrote about her was A Reporter Who Knew Too Much. She never focused on any of that. She never focused on Oswald. She never focused on the CIA. She focused on Jack Ruby. And of course, yeah.
Hold on. I know I'm interrupting you, Mark, but this would be a good place to tell people who she was.
All right. Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Well, it's so interesting how I found her. because the first book that I wrote about the JFK assassination was this book right here, Melvin Belli, King of the Courtroom. I had an advantage here. He's Ruby's lawyer, as you know. I had an advantage here because I actually practiced law with him in the 1980s in San Francisco. I had an office in his building and all of that. And if there's one thing I knew, two things I knew about Belli. One is he was a mafioso wannabe. He hung out with those guys. Mickey Cohen was one of his major clients and all that. He spent time in Las Vegas all the time. And second is the man had no morals. He would with clients and including Ruby, we will find out, he never had them. He was really a guy who loved the limelight and all of that. So while I was researching the Belli book, I talked to a friend of his, a doctor, and this guy said, well, you know, he knew Dorothy Kilgallen. And I said, well, who's that? And he said, well, you don't know anything about her, Mark. Come on. And I said, no, I don't. He said, well, you don't know about the What's My Line quiz show on CBS for 10 years? She was a panelist for that. You don't know about her having a newspaper column in New York City circulated to 200,000 people a day. You don't know about her radio show listened to by 1 million people. And Mark, you don't know about the fact that she is the most credible reporter to have investigated the JFK assassination. And I said, what? And he said, yes. He said she was the real deal. In fact, you know, she was a college dropout. She ended up getting through gender discrimination, all of that. She covered the Dr. Sam Shepard case, which became the fugitive film, the Charles Lindbergh case, all the big cases at the time. Dorothy was the one who was there. And then he said, you know, you really need to look into this. And he gave me a quote that triggered, and I know this happens to you as well, Neil. When somebody tells you something you can't get out of your mind, you've got to follow through. He said, you know, Mark, when she died, Mel Belli told me she was killed. And so that led me to trying to figure out exactly how to investigate Dorothy. But the first thing I did was look into Belli's association with the mafia. And the second book I wrote was The Poisoned Patriarch, which looked at the 1960 election, when there was no question that and I had an eyewitness there, and nobody ever had this particular witness, John Sigenthaler, who later founded USA Today. I found him through the Freedom Forum in Nashville, where I spoke, and he told me about the fact that he was there at a breakfast with Joe Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Jack Kennedy, and that's when Bobby Kennedy was appointed Attorney General by JFK. And if you know anything about the '60 election, basically what happened there is those Kennedys knew they were going to lose it. So what did they do? They went to some of the mafioso, including Marcello, and said, you help us win the elections in West Virginia and Illinois, and you get us in the White House, we'll leave you alone. Almost anybody who's ever... Yeah.
Hold on, Mark. You're like a runaway freight train. So just let me just summarize these points here. That what you just said is that an associate of Jack Ruby's attorney told you point blank that Kilgallen was killed. And you also said that the Kennedy family cut a deal with the mafioso Don or Godfather in Chicago. Was he in Chicago or New Orleans?
No, New Orleans. Not Giancana, Marcello.
Okay, so Marcello is in New Orleans. They cut the deal with him, and they say, if you help us win, we will back off of the mafia. And remember, Kennedy in the Senate, Jack Kennedy in the Senate, and his brother as a senior aide went after mafiosos with hearings, so they're all part of that in the 50s. And they said, we will back off of the mob if you get us into the White House. And then almost immediately upon taking office, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy has Marcello deported, which is a classic double cross. And then this double, so he comes back to the United States and he basically plots his revenge, which brings us to the assassination, which he was the sort of the progenitor of, pushing for that. There are other people involved, but basically he drove the train or drove the bus to make sure that assassination happened. Kilgallen, a friend of Kennedy, becomes suspicious and she becomes suspicious because of Jack Ruby, right? Go
Exactly.
into
Yeah.
how. So talk about how Kilgallen locked into the Jack Ruby story as being a bogus narrative. Your call, sir. Go ahead.
And I'll slow down a little bit. I get very excited about all of this. I'm
No, we're
sorry.
excited. It's
That's
big
all right.
news. But
But
go
that was
ahead,
very
please.
good. It's very good what you just said there. See, I'm a former criminal defense attorney. Almost all murder cases. Tried some cases with F. Lee Bailey. I knew what I was doing back then. And I write, in fact, like I talk to juries. Most people say my books are easily read. Well, they are because I do like I talk to juries. So you got to look at motive. So Marcelo ends up in Guatemala. And Nick Pileggi, the famous author and so on and so forth, once told me the first thing about Sicilians is their middle name is Revenge. So Marcelo can't let this happen. So he goes ahead and he orchestrates the death of JFK, which I have proven in my books. Now, the Jack Ruby situation is interesting because I leaped from Belli to Ruby, and then I checked out the fact that when JFK died, it was her friend because he had invited Dorothy Kilgallen and her son to the White House, made a big fuss over the little boy. And when JFK died, she said, "What I remember is a tall man stooping over a little boy, congratulating him on his letter." So it was personal for Dorothy. And so what she did is she went to Dallas. She interviewed Jesse Curry, who told her that the first shots came from the overpass. And then she focused in on Ruby. And just to quickly summarize that, all these experts out there, I'm sorry, Neil, but Dorothy Kilgallen was in Dallas. She was at the Ruby trial. She's the only reporter out of 400 reporters to have interviewed him, and she did it 3 times. She then was able to get a copy of his Warren Commission testimony before it was supposed to be released, which was a big deal, and got her in the crosshairs of J. Edgar Hoover. So she had accumulated all of this evidence. And what we know during that time is that they were watching her, they were following her. She said, "If the wrong people knew what I know about the assassination, it cost me my life. I've gone ahead and gotten a gun," and all of this, because she knew that they were watching what she was doing. So what happens then? Well, we don't know what Jack Ruby told her. That's one of the sorriest things that I have to announce to your audience. We don't know why, because when she died, and we can talk about how she died, her JFK assassination file and a manuscript that she was writing for a tell-all booklet for Random House were taken, and we've never seen them since.
All right, so that manuscript and book contract with Random House was her death sentence.
Yeah, I think it was, except that I really believe that when she took off for New Orleans to investigate Marcelo, and I have proven in my book she connected Marcelo, Oswald, and Ruby. But I think where it really happened was she was able to find out that Jack Ruby's testimony before the Warren Commission. She's at the front row in the Ruby trial, so she looks at that evidence that he says, he tells people he's going to be there when Oswald was transferred. Well, in denial of justice, I proved that there was an overhearing of a telephone call where he said, "Well, I'll be there when Oswald's going to be transferred." So she knew all that. And she was the first one to really go against the grain with regard to J. Edgar Hoover shouting to the world, "Oswald alone, Oswald alone." In my letter to the task force that we'll talk about in a little bit, I listed for them every column that she wrote. The first one was Oswald file must not close. And then she went on with that, wrote all of these columns. So she's put herself in danger. But then she found out about when the final Warren Commission report was to be released about a dissent. And maybe you know about that. But basically what happened there is, what's that?
The dissent? So the dissent was that Senator Russell?
It was Senator Russell and her friend, Senator John Sherman Cooper. And she found out about that. And so she was going to put all that, and they were promised it would be in the final report. And then, of course, they were double crossed. And I've got in the new book, I've got those audio tape recordings of LBJ and Hoover talking about, there was, I don't believe there's a single shot. Neither one of the senators believed that. They demanded a dissent, and then they were told it was going to be in there. And of course, when the final report came out, it wasn't. Dorothy found out about that. And I think that was the death knell. I think from then on, there was no question she had to be silenced. And just one more thing. People have asked me, why do you put so much credence in Dorothy Kilgallen's investigation more than anybody else? Well, they silenced her. She had it right. There's no question about that. And so I've been trying to get a thorough investigation of her death for a long time. One of the reasons I got a hold of the task force here is not only to give them all of my evidence and everything in a 29-page document, but also request that they look into Dorothy Kilgallen's death as well.
Well, Mark, this is a lot. It's a lot, and
Can we talk about the records for a minute?
We're out of time. No.
Oh, just let me
sorry.
tell you one thing there, okay?
Mark, it's a real estate business. We've run out.
Okay.
We
The
only have
last
so
batch
much-
was much better than this one.
Okay.
The last batch of documents was much better.
I'm really grateful for someone like yourself who's written so many books and done so much research, who has brought back this woman who was truly a great journalist, a great communicator, and someone who I think you would say died for her art. And you're saying that wasn't a suicide of barbiturates and alcohol. That was maybe a little tricky.
The task force needs to look at my evidence and look into her death and all of that. Otherwise, it will be the same sort of a situation as we had with the Warren Commission. We can't let that happen again.
Mark, where can people find you?
Well, my website is markshawbooks.com, and my email is mshawin@yahoo.com. And I answer every email that I get. So I'd love to hear from people.
Mark, I'm thrilled that you answered my email, and we're going to have to find an excuse to bring you back. Take care, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You're a good man. Bye-bye.
After the break, we're going to talk to Tommy Marquez, who is a Republican strategist. He's a consultant. I met him when I was covering Capitol Hill, where he was a longtime senior staffer. We're going to talk about gun rights in the context of Trump 47, and in particular, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and the changes going on there. We'll see you with Tommy Marquez after the break.
We live in uncertain times. In fact, we live at a time when our own governments all over the world are warning us that there could be big problems with our power grid. World War III seems to be right on the horizon. Let me ask you this. Do you have a satellite phone? Should communications go down with cell towers? Do you have a satellite phone to get a hold of that college student or your spouse who travels, whatever it might be, to get a hold of your senior adult parents? We have satellite phones at worldviewtalk.com, and you get the satellite phone for free when you sign up for their very reasonable payment programs for the service. Sign up for the service with a reasonable contract, get the satellite phone for free. Worldviewtalk.com. You'll also find they have, well, what I now have, which is a solar generator. Yeah, I have a gas generator, an LP propane generator, but what if that goes down? I want to back up to my backup. So I now have a solar generator as well. You'll find them at worldviewtalk.com. Check it out today, worldviewtalk.com.
Consumers often ask, what should I expect when I take the Bella Grace Elixir? And the answer's varied. It really depends on what your health and wellness needs are. I would consider this as your foundational core product for a whole range of health and wellness issues. Let me give you a few examples. If you're a little bit older and you have some joint health issues, some problems with mobility and discomfort, the elixir is going to be your best friend. If you have some skin health issues, wrinkles, hydration, aging, all of those elements are going to be benefited from the elixir, including age spots. Now, if you're in a younger demographic, maybe visual health is where you need some assistance. Eye fatigue, dry eyes, all of those are going to be benefited by the elixir. It's a core product because it benefits so many.
My next guest is one of those legendary Capitol Hill staffers, now a Republican strategist, Tommy Marquez. Tommy, thank you very much for coming on. Welcome to Washington Desk.
Thank you for having me, Neil. Appreciate you.
So the ATF is maybe one of the most troubled, corrupt, crazed government agencies. It's one of those agencies that is in charge of enforcing three things that are legal, right? Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms is still legal, I think, as of airtime, right?
Yeah.
And
three of my favorite things.
Yeah, and so it came out of Treasury because it was basically revenues, and they just wanted to collect the duties on
Taxes.
the different things, taxes. But now it's part of DOJ, and for a long time there was no confirmed director of ATF. Finally, Senate Republicans rolled over and allowed Biden to have a confirmed ATF director. And what the Biden administration did was zero tolerance on not gun owners, but the gun shops, the gun store owners, the federal firearms license holders, the gun dealers. And this zero tolerance was so extreme. I mentioned earlier in the show that there was a woman who was working for this gun store, and she saw a county on the form, and she thought it said country, so she put in USA. And the ATF said zero tolerance. We're going to pull the license. I talked to the guy. The guy had his license for 30 years, and because of that mistake, hit the bricks. You're out of business. Can you sort of talk about where, so now Kash Patel is the director of the ATF, and so where do you think things are going now?
Well, I think the ATF needs to be abolished. There's no actual law that says, they always refer to the 1968 Gun Control Act, and they say that this is, the guidance in which says the ATF should be created. But there's actually no law that says that. It's not in there directly. It states in that law that there needs to be FFLs, which the case of the young individual that you were talking about for 30 years working there and losing that license, what their requirements are, and that they need to be established in order to transfer gun sales state to state. But there's actual no governance that says the ATF needs to exist as it does. So what we're hoping is to see it be abolished. This is something from a couple of different standpoints. The ATF, all they seem to do is go after legal gun owners and legal shop owners and ride them hard. They look for ways to take away their Second Amendment rights. And the other part of that is the ATF is this huge organization, and it's gotten so massive, and they're not really helping the public. They're not reducing crime. They're not taking illegal guns off the street. And so from a standpoint of saving money, why not absorb the ATF into one of the other branches, maybe DHS, maybe the DOJ, maybe the FBI, and go after illegal manufacturers with the ghost guns, things like that, go after people who illegally are owning guns and get the tax revenue from it. But instead, what they focused on is legal gun owners. I actually know a case in San Diego where an individual brought in a weapon and said, hey, it's jamming on me. I bought it here. What's the problem? They looked at it, they lubed it up and put it back together, and then it was working. They were then turned in as a repair, and they're not allowed to do repairs. They're only allowed to do sales. And their license was suspended, and they went after them trying to remove their license altogether. So the ATF, it's just an organization, much like the IRS and much like the Department of Education, that needs to go.
Wow. So I'm looking at these numbers here, and you're familiar with these, but I'll state them so I get credit, not you. So in 2022, 88 FFLs lost their license.
Yeah.
In 2023, 157, and in 2024, 195. So that's what? That's like 350, almost 400. And they weren't going after these gun stores that were like 10 and 12, store chain, right? They were going after Walmart, right? or any of these other large stores that sell firearms. They are going after the mom and pops. They're going after the guys who load up their trailer and go from gun show to gun show every weekend. And they were just jamming up these small businessmen who just don't have a legal staff or anything else, and just jamming them up. What can be done to bring these things back? And do you see the Trump administration, right, going after having a program of bringing back some of these licenses for the FFLs, or are they just going to walk away from them and just say good luck?
No, I see the Trump administration are making major changes and strides for these individuals, and thank God for groups like the NRA, California Rifle and Pistol Association, CRPA, and the Gun Owners of America. Those are all really good groups that I've worked with while working in Congress to restore a lot of these acts. And I'll give you another number. In 2009 to 2017, over 257,000 veterans' guns were taken away by the Obama administration when they were going in for mental health exams or applying for fiduciary benefits. So we've seen that, and to understand, if they're going in for fiduciary benefits, these are people who don't have a lot of money or cannot take care of their financial obligations.
Yeah,
they don't have the means to do so.
Let me jump in here because I remember this very well. So there was the VA would have a program where some of these guys, after 4 or 5 deployments or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They were unable to run their own affairs or having trouble running their own affairs. And so the VA came in and said, we will pay your bills. We will straighten out your life. We will do things for you administratively. And basically, and so it was almost like an amazing service, right? And we'll help, we'll fix you. And all you have to do is say, I need your help. And as soon as you sign the paper saying you need the help, then the government said, oh, because you're now under the care of the VA and unable to manage your affairs, that means you can no longer have a gun. And so a lot of these guys, and then obviously when people are going in for mental health issues, right? And they tell the VA, I'm hearing noise, I have noises, I wake up in sweats, I'm having dreams, whatever your issue is, and they encourage you to talk to us, tell us all your problems. As soon as you tell the VA your problems, the VA says, fantastic, by the way, we're taking all your guns. Go ahead.
Yeah, they report it, yeah. No, that's exactly what was going on. And so what they seem to do, the government loves to target these individuals who aren't going to be able to attorney up. They don't have the money. They don't have the financial means, just like those FFLs that are small guys. And, the have and have nots, I always tell people, are people who have lobbyists. Everyone thinks that they don't need a lobbyist when they have a medium or small size company. Actually, those are the people who need lobbyists the most. Those are the people who need representation the most, because they're the ones most likely to get their rights taken away by people in Congress, by nameless, faceless bureaucrats who get to hide behind the anonymity of the shield of their agency, which is not even, again, there is no law that says that the ATF is to be formed. There is none. And regarding the FFLs and their licenses being taken away, if you look up the requirements that are actually on the 1968 Gun Control Act, all it states is that they have to be 21 years old. They cannot be prohibited for having firearms. So at the time, if you had a dishonorable discharge, you couldn't get a gun. That has changed from the military. You couldn't be a convicted felon. That's a good rule. I'm for that. They had to have a physical premise of business, which is a good rule. We don't want internet sales, right? Detailed records of firearms transactions, allowed inspections, and follow federal, state, and local laws. Then they came up with hey, you can't work on a gun here and sell a gun here. You can't modify a gun here and sell a gun here. Or you can't repair and modify at the same location. These are some of the ridiculous rules that are also out there that exist for wineries. They have rules state to state where you can have a winery, but you can't sell beer there. You can't sell alcohol there, but you can have wine. And these are the kind of convoluted rules that are not voted on. So when they're always talking about Elon Musk, nobody voted for him. Okay, nobody voted for the ATF. Nobody appointed the former director, Steve Dettelbach, who put in all these rules, who recently resigned in January. No one voted for these individuals, and no one voted to make this an agency or laws. These are just administrative rules that they've come up with in their minds to say that this is what is allowed with gun ownership and transfers and sales, and this is what isn't.
Hey, Tommy, where can people find you?
Well, I'm all throughout social media on Tommy Marquez Consulting, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. As long as TikTok stays on, I'll be there. That's my primary spot. We could always find me walking around the halls of Congress in D.C. advocating for our veterans, advocating for good people, advocating for rule changes and for smaller government.
Oh, it's great to see you at CPAC too, man.
It was great to see you, Neil.
All right.
We need to do that together and have some cigars.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Tommy Marquez, thank you very much for joining us at Washington Desk.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up our show for this week. Thank you very much for joining us. You can find me at Reporter McCabe on all the socials. Please also check out my pieces that I write at redstate.com, and also join me on the X Space that I co-host Tuesdays, 8 to 11 in the East, Trump Tuesday. But of course, you can always find me here Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 8 in the East for the Washington Report. And of course, Saturdays and Sundays, 7 in the East for the Washington Desk program. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
This is Brannon House Live. Whether the issue is law, science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, religion, government, or national security, Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon House.
And welcome to the broadcast on this March 21st, 2021, March 21st, 2025. What did I just say? March 21st, 2025. Okay, that's the date today. Now, what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, let's see here. Look at this story right here. Fire of war fears Putin may be behind Heathrow fire. His courts of experts warn blaze bears all the hallmarks of a Russian sabotage plot. Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. How do we know? How do we know the CIA didn't do this? How do we know MI6 didn't do this to get the Europeans ready to go to war and have the stomach to go to war and send their boys to war? Or maybe Putin did it because, I don't know, they